fantastic guest for the next half hour or so. His name is Jules Mountain, and he survived a 7-hour operation to remove a cancerous tumour in his head and 4 months of chemotherapy. And spurred on by his recovery, he decided to join an expedition ascending Mount Everest. But life was about to throw another challenge his way, and he found himself at the heart of the deadliest day in Everest's history. He's written a book about it. It's called Aftershock, and he's with us now. Jules, good afternoon. Welcome to Afternoon Edition.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me on.
So before we talk about getting to Nepal and Everest and everything that happened there, talk us through this life-changing experience that happened when you were diagnosed with cancer. What was your diagnosis and how did you deal with it?
Well, I was trying to sell my company at the time, and then I went and I had a very itchy lump behind my ear. I went to see the doctor. I said, it doesn't feel very good. And they said, well, we think it's nothing. Take some antibiotics, away you go. And I said, there's a history of cancer in my mother's side of the family. It could be a tumour. And the guy said, no, don't worry about it, it's fine. And I went back 3 weeks later and he rushed me off to a specialist and said, you better get this seen to. So they did a fine needle biopsy and they said, the bad news is it's cancer. And it could be one of two types. One will kill you very quick and the other will kill you if we don't treat it.
So non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, was that what it was?
It was non-Hodgkin's. It was the second type. Luckily, it was not the really bad one. But they didn't know at the time, so they said we can operate and cut it out of your head. And what do you want to do? And of course, you want to get rid of it. So I said, yeah, great, chop it out.
7 hours on the table.
Yeah.
And then
it wasn't too good, I can tell you. I didn't know anything about it at the time, mind you. I was flat out, but that wasn't good.
But you discharged yourself really, really quickly. Tell us about that.
Well, I came round after the operation, and what happens is they sever all the nerves in one side of your head, so all the side of your face slopes down. So I didn't look great, and I stayed there the night. My brother came to see me the next day, and then I had a reaction to the operation. It was a sort of anaphylactic shock, and they rushed the crash team in, and they said, and I remember the guy leaning over me, and the whole room spinning, and the guy's saying, I may have to cut your chest open and massage your heart. And he said, this is going to be very bloody if I've got to do it. And I thought, crikey, that's the last thing I want to hear. I'm flat on my back here. I think I'm going to die. And some guy's going to cut my chest open and start massaging my heart. So that was a very scary moment. I thought, I've survived the operation. Now I'm going to die in the bed. The next day, that's the absolute pits. So and they put some monitors on my chest, and then they turned me over, stuck a great big needle up my backside, filled me full of some, I don't know what it was, drug, and then I calmed down, and they put an oxygen mask on me, and they wheeled. I said, my brother can't go, because I really thought I was going to die that night. So they wheeled in, put me up bed, camp bed, and he stayed all night sleeping next to me in the hospital room.
So. Did you prepare yourself, Jules? How do you prepare yourself for that if you think you're not going to make it through the night?
I think when it hits you like that, there's nothing else you can do. I was breathing the oxygen, holding my brother's hand, and I was just thinking I've got to keep going. I was thinking of my two daughters, and I thought I've just got to keep breathing, keep going, and try and stay calm. And you just have to keep going. But it's so instantaneous that it's not as though you can really prepare for it. You just have to manage it in the moment.
What do you think you learned from business that helped you get through that period? Because, of course, to set up your own business, to make that business a success, you need focus, you need tenacity, you need to be bloody minded, don't you?
Yeah, you do. My dad's sitting here with me laughing when you said that. He thinks that's very, very amusing, actually. You do. You need to be determined, and you need to keep driving on. Particularly, the business was in London, and it's tough in London. It's not easy. And I decided I wanted to get out of the business. I wanted to have a more relaxed life, spend more time with my daughters, and so I wanted to sell the business, and then the cancer hit at the same time. So it was trying to sell the business and get through the cancer as well. I was lucky though, because the operation was a success, and then I saw an excellent consultant, and he advised me to have chemotherapy as opposed to radiotherapy, and the prognosis at that stage was pretty good.
And you signed yourself out pretty early on as well then, after having the successful op.
Yeah, the next day I said, I've got to go. I've got to get out of here. Next day, after I'd had the sort of shock, and I slept there the night in the hospital, and the consultant came the next day, and I said, I've got to get out of here. I can't stay here, because I was fairly convinced that the hospital was creating that environment. I wanted to get home and see my kids, and be surrounded by my family, where I would feel back, a little bit back to normal. My head was still spinning from the operation, but at least I would feel, it was my daughter's birthday on the Saturday as well, so I was very keen to get back for that.
So 4 months of chemo, and
Yeah.
during that time, how did you change?
Well, I lost all my hair. All my hair fell out, so that all went. And how did I change? I don't know. I think you just think this is a good thing, because it's going to help me get through this. And if there's any cancerous cells floating around the body that they've missed in the operation, this will pick them up hopefully and get rid of them. And I think you really appreciate. I never forget when I came out after the operation. I got home. I never forget sitting in the back garden and having a cup of tea, and I thought, this is absolutely fantastic. This tea tastes so good. And I could see every blade of grass in the garden. I could hear the birds singing. Everything was magnified 100 times, and it really makes you appreciate the beauty around you. That's one of the things. It really was quite fantastic. Oh. And then you just you go through the chemo three weekly cycles. So I'd book it in on a Friday afternoon, so I'd be working as normal Monday to Friday lunchtime. I'd go off and have the chemo, and then I'd collapse and have the weekend to get over it a bit, and then back to work again on the Monday. And then I'd feel very grotty for the first week. I'd feel pretty grotty for the second week, and then the third week I'd feel back to normal, and then bang, they'd inject me all over again.
So going through all of that.
Sorry, but I mean, there are thousands of people that have been through that. It's just the way it is. You just have to get on and deal with it.
But you go through all that, not only personally, but your family go through that with you, and see you get better. But initially, of course, go through the pain of what the diagnosis was initially. And then rather than saying, you know what, let's just get a nice cruise and go around and relax and enjoy life, you decide to put them through it all again by deciding to climb one of the world's most dangerous mountains.
Well, we did.
Thanks for that, by the way. Everyone in your family was saying, Jules, at the time, I can imagine, including your dad.
It was quite a bit later, actually. We did go to Australia for a big 4-week holiday. So it took about 3 months to really recover after the chemo. I felt like I'd been bashed around, and it did take me really 3 months to get back to any state of normality. And then the following year we went to Australia for a 4-week holiday. That was really nice. And then we went and did Disney. And the funny thing is, when you go to Disney, we were staying in this hotel. I noticed everybody else that had operations. And
really?
Virtually it really brings it home to you. Virtually every family there, somebody in the family had an operation. And I did wonder, is it something that, I wanted my kids, I thought if I die now, if this comes back and I die, I wanted my girls to remember me. They were quite young at the time. And I thought I really want them to have something very special where they have that moment, we've had that moment together, that wonderful holiday, and they can remember me for the rest of their lives, not just sitting at home or going to school or whatever else. So Disney was the obvious choice, and I do wonder how many parents are like that. It'd be very interesting to see, because literally everybody in the pool at the hotel we stayed in, somebody in the family had got scars and had had some sort of operation.
And this was a very special family holiday then, presumably, for all of them.
Yeah. Well, my daughters were very young at the time. They didn't know what was going on. It was very special, very special for me. But my daughters didn't know. I mean, I lost my hair, and they just thought, Dad's shaved his head off. I looked pretty yellow and ill. But I didn't want them to know, because I didn't want them to panic. And they've only just found out. Actually, I told them because the book was coming out. I had to tell them about the whole thing, and they're great. They took it really well.
How old are they now?
They're 13 and 11 now. But I sat them down. I just said, look, I've got something to tell you. It was quite a few years ago. Don't panic over it. They were like, yeah, Dad, that's cool. Yeah, fine. On we go. So they were great. They were great. But I couldn't have it coming out in the book and not,
Sure.
and they didn't know. So I had to tell them.
So Everest.
Yeah.
And your surname had nothing to do with this particular decision, Jules Mountain.
I got to base camp, and everyone says, "Oh, man alive, you've changed your name by default, haven't you?" They said, we know you have. I said, "No." I said, "I swear to you, I promise." I said, "I haven't changed my name by default. That is my family name." And the most amazing thing, we're from Lincolnshire. The family's from Lincolnshire, very flat, yeah.
Oh,
and I haven't traced back any mountaineering anywhere in the family. So
It was fate.
So,
I think it was fate. Yeah.
So are you a man constantly searching for a challenge?
I think
You get bored very
I
easily.
think I am. Yeah, I built up a couple of companies and sold them, and I wanted something else. another challenge, but I wanted a physical challenge, and I went off and did the Haute route, which is ski touring from Chamonix to Zermatt, and that's 5 days up at 3,000 meters, staying in huts, and that was to prove to myself that I was still physically as able as I had been before the cancer, and then it was a bigger challenge, and I happened to be in Chamonix skiing, and I knew some people there, and I was introduced to a guy that was running an expedition, and he said, we're off in April, and this was in February, and I said, have you got any spare places? In a sort of jokey way over a beer, and he said, yeah, we have. Why, do you want to go? And I said, yeah, I do. And that was it.
And by this stage, you're away from the medical profession, you've gone through all the treatment, you're all clear. You don't have to go and ask a doctor for advice on this?
No, I was all clear. The prognosis was very good. It could come back at any time, but when a certain period of time has gone by, they say, fine, just behave like everybody else.
Did you? Are you the kind of person that asks for permission, or you ask for forgiveness after?
I'm the sort of person that asks for forgiveness afterwards. Yeah.
So the family found out you were going to do it rather than I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I my partner, she's a very keen skier and climber, and she said, I thought about it, and I thought I can't tell her, and I couldn't tell my dad and my brother about it. I thought, I've got to really think about this. Now I've got this place and I can go, but I'm going to be going in literally 6 weeks' time, very little time to prepare. And I thought, I've got to get this straight in my head. So I spent a week mulling it over, thinking about it. And then I met the guy who was running the expedition again in London. And I thought, I've really got to make my own mind up without everybody saying, no, you're a fool, you shouldn't do this, or this is very dangerous, this is risky. All the other things they fill your head with, and no, you've got 2 beautiful daughters, why would you want to go to Everest? All the reasons why you shouldn't do something. I thought, I've got to come to the conclusion in my own head. And then when I've made the decision, I'll then tell everybody else, and I'll beg on bending knee for forgiveness. So that's what I do.
I think that's the best way to live life.
Yeah.
Talk us through those days, Jules, making the walk to base camp and seeing Everest for the first time up close.
I've got to say, it's the most fantastic trip to base camp. Is really lovely, and many people just do that particular trip to base camp. It's a 10-day trek. And it really is beautiful. It's like walking in the Alps, except there's no air, there's no oxygen up there. And it gets thinner and thinner the higher you go up. The human body can take 600 meters, above 3,000 meters, you can do an ascent of 600 meters a day. So you can't fly to base camp and just be there. You've got to do the 10-day trek to acclimatise as you go up. And it is lovely. It's very beautiful. The lower parts, there's trees, the grass. You meet the Sherpa people. They all live in the valley. They came over they were chased out of Tibet 350 years ago, and they settled in the Khumbu Valley because it was a very fertile valley, very good for farming. So they're all one big family, really. And you see the little villages with them, and they're all farming, growing bok choy potatoes, and it really is a beautiful experience going to base camp.
And base camp's huge, isn't it?
Base camp is big. Yeah, I was quite surprised. I mean, there are normally 250 climbers and Sherpas there, and in various expeditions. So there'll be 20 to 30 expeditions there, and we are camped in a sort of a long line along the middle of the valley on top of the glacier. So you are sleeping on the glacier every night on the freezing ice. And I wasn't really prepared for how grim the conditions were. I don't know what Guantanamo Bay was like, but I imagine it was damn sight worse at Everest Base Camp than it was in Guantanamo Bay in terms of sleeping conditions, because it was bloody freezing, -15 every night. It was horrible. So it really was. For me, it was grim. It was. I didn't really enjoy that part of it, although I love the climbing.
So tell us about the morning of the 25th of April, 2015.
We'd been waiting there for a few weeks, and we'd been waiting to do our rotations. You go up and down, and we decided to have a little party. We had a big meeting tent, so we thought, we've been sitting around waiting and had a few days of rest, and we got a few beers and we got some whiskey, and somebody said, let's have a little party, let's invite some of the other expeditions around, let's enjoy ourselves. And at 5,400 meters, I can tell you, it really, a pint of beer really hits you. So we had our party, we had a bit of fun, and we were actually We put some music on. We were actually singing and dancing at base camp at 5,400 metres. You're 600 metres higher than the top of Mont Blanc, and I can tell you that really takes the breath out of you.
What's the soundtrack? What was the music?
What was
Do
the
you
music?
remember?
We had a great Polish guy, Yarek, with us, and he was playing some Polish songs. And I can't remember
Oh,
what they were. They were
yeah,
great.
of course, yeah.
They were really great. It was great fun. And then we went to bed, and I woke up the next morning. I thought, oof, I only had a few beers, but I thought, I know I've had a few beers. And we went down for breakfast, and I came back, and I was lying in my tent, and tiny little tents. And all of a sudden, the ground I woke up, the ground moved to the right, just shunted to the right. And I thought, that's really odd. And then it just picked me up half a metre and shifted me to the left. And I thought, this is really, really strange. I jumped out of the tent, looked up, and there's just this wall of snow coming towards us. The whole sky was full of snow, just coming hurtling towards us. So it was not. I thought I was going to die. I thought that's it. It's all over, because I've never seen anything like it. I've seen some avalanches in my time, but this just filled everything.
So once that has happened, of course, and you've survived. It's the aftermath and what you saw afterwards. Describe that scene.
It was,
if you can.
It was like like nothing I've ever seen. It was what I would imagine. It was like somebody had just set off a huge bomb and blown everything up. If you ever look at YouTube and see the pictures of it, complete decimation in the middle of the camp, the whole of the camp. And what happened is the ends of the camps were relatively untouched. But the middle, so you've got these 20 or 30 expeditions all spread out in a long line. And the earthquake kicked off the ice off Pulmori, which is the mountain opposite Everest. It all came hurtling down. And it kicked off, the ice that it kicked off was the size of a town. That much ice, just huge. And there was so much ice, it just went straight across the valley and took out the whole middle of base camp.
More than 20 people dead, and of course across Nepal, 9,000 people lost their lives in that earthquake.
Really, really horrific.
You were on the edge, as you say, of where that main bit of snow came down.
Yeah.
When you described seeing the ice and the snow coming towards you, what did you do at that moment? What is instinct in that moment, fight or flight? What does it tell you to do?
Well, for me, it was like 15 minutes, but it was about 10 seconds. But everything slows down, and I looked. I was just wearing my socks, no shoes, and I looked to my right, and I thought, can I run? That's your first instinct. Can I outrun this thing? And the ground's it's ice covered in rocks, and I thought, well, I can't outrun it. I've not got any shoes on. Even if I could run, I'd get nowhere. And then it was right, what do I do? So at the last minute, I just dived back in the tent and buried my head in my sleeping bag and thermarest, and just put my arms over my head, and then bang, the whole thing hit. And the tent was rocking backwards and forwards violently. The tent filled up with snow. I was covered in snow, and just this howling gale, and it just kept coming. And I thought the tent would be picked up, and we had a natural lake in the glacier next to us, and I had this vision of the tent being picked up and hurtled into the lake. And then you see these dreadful Hollywood movies where there's somebody wrapped in something in the water, and they're trying to get out, and they can't get out because they're in the canvas. All this was going through my head. All these things, and it's like slow motion. And then all of a sudden it started to slow down, and I pushed myself out of the snow, and the tent was still open, so my instinct was to zip the tent up. And then crazily, my instinct was, where's all my electronic gear, my phone, my camera, my laptop? And I started digging in the snow trying to find the electronic equipment. And I don't know why that was the first instinct to do that, but it was just trying to get the stuff out of the snow.
Deeply subconsciously, probably.
Check
You
your
wanted
emails.
to find...
Check the emails, yeah.
Classic
Might be some important
businessman
emails.
on holiday, yes.
I suspect you probably somewhere in your subconscious wanted to be in touch immediately with your family.
I did, and it took some time actually, because all the communications were blown to pieces. We had two big dishes, satellite dishes, and they went spinning off down the valley, and there was no communication. And there was a telecommunications mast down at Gorupshep, the nearest village, which is a 2-hour trek, and that was damaged. So there was no communication initially at all, and then eventually some people had satellite phones, and they managed to get a signal with satellite phones. So it was about 4 or 5 hours before I managed to contact my family and let them know that I was safe.
No, it was your dad who's sitting beside you now.
It is. It was my dad that's sitting beside me now. Yeah. I phoned my brother. He always answers his phone, and then one time he doesn't blooming well answer his phone. The one time I phoned from base camp to say that I'm alive. So I phoned my dad, and then I said, look, I'm on somebody else's sat phone. Everyone wants to use it. People are queuing up. I said, you've got to just get the message out to the kids and everybody that I'm fine. And And then kindly, Vicky, my partner, posted a message on Facebook to let everybody know that I was okay.
And you were then performing triage, really. You say it was like World War One.
It was like it was horrific. There were dead bodies. There were over 100 people injured. And there were people just leaving base camp saying, we've got to go. And they were just leaving. And I said, where are you going? There's nowhere to go. I said, you can't leave. It's a 2-hour trek down to Gorup Shep. You should stay here. You know, and by that stage, we'd got some hot water, we'd got tea, coffee, we'd got some biscuits. And it was like, come and sit in our meeting tent, just relax, you know, take stock of what's happened and let's work on what we're going to do. And then injured people started coming in. So we put the injured people in the mess tents. And I'm a first aider for the Ski Club of Great Britain, so I went in the mess tent and just started trying to deal with the people as best I could, and that was the most horrendous 16 hours of my life. It really was, seeing all these people incredibly badly injured, and I'd got paracetamol and ibuprofen, and that was it. And there really wasn't any structure and organisation in place to deal with an event like that.
How does it bond you, your fellow human beings, being in a situation like that and after the event, because you've shared an experience that thankfully few people have to share?
Yeah, I think you become desperately concerned for the people. And there was one guy we suspected had a broken neck, a guy called Mark Rugel. I've never managed to contact him again since, Dutch guy. And when he came in, he was so badly covered in blood, I thought he was a Sherpa. I couldn't, you just couldn't. And I asked him, I said, what's your name? And he said, Mark. I said, where are you from? The Netherlands. I was like, the Netherlands. And he could barely speak, and one eye was closed, and he was still bleeding from his head. And his neck was bashed, and he was in a dreadful state, and his feet had swollen up. And it was just I was so worried about him all night long that I was so worried he wouldn't make the night. And you become very closely attached to the people. You become emotionally attached to the people. And
then afterwards, I mean, are you in contact still with people who were there on that mountain in 2015?
Yes, I am in contact. I'm in contact with the people in the expedition. I'm not in contact with the injured people because we were told that there was a weather front coming in, and the only way to get people out is by helicopter. And we were told that there was going to be 3 days of bad weather, so we were looking at trying to keep these people alive for 3 days. And I thought that's just it's going to destroy me. And but I've got to do what I've got to do. And then luckily for us, we had a clear weather window the next morning, and the helicopters got in, and we managed to get all the injured people out early the next morning.
And when did talk, Jules, turn of the possibility to continuing up the summit?
It didn't. Not for a while. First of all, we decided as an expedition we were going to stay because we heard, by that stage, we'd heard of the dreadful situation in Kathmandu. We'd heard they'd closed the airport. We'd heard nobody could get in or out, and the real chaos. And we were at base camp. Our camp, 3 of our tents had been destroyed, but the rest were okay. And we had accommodation. We had obviously plenty of water to melt the snow. We had food for 4 weeks with us, and we decided the best thing to do was stay where we were and sit it out, and not put any more burden on Kathmandu. So we decided to stay, and it was really 2 or 3 days later when we were then helping the other expeditions clear up the damage and try and put the camps back together again. And then people started talking about, what are we going to do? Are we going to go on and go up, or are we going to leave and go home? And then it's all the tough decisions, and it's all the emotion of, is it right to go on? Should we go on? Is it right because of the people that have died? A very, very difficult decision to make, very difficult.
Well, we'll find out what eventually did happen with you very shortly. It's a pleasure talking to you. Jules Mountain is with us. That is his real name, we promise. He didn't change it.
It was formerly Jules Surfer.
He's written a book called Aftershock. He's going to be with us for the next few minutes. If you've got any questions for him, I'm sure he wouldn't mind. 85058 at BBC 5.
You're listening to a BBC 5 Live podcast.
If you like this, you might also like this.
Kermode and Mayo's film review.
If you don't know your app from your elbow, boom tish, here all week, tip your waitress.
To find out more about our range of podcasts, click, tap or swipe bbc.co.uk/5live.
Jules Mountain is our big guest on the programme today. He climbed Everest not once but twice, but we haven't got quite there yet. He's also recovered from cancer, an extraordinary double whammy experience when he was in hospital, but he came through all of that. He's here to tell his tale. His book's called Aftershock, and we left you, Jules, after the avalanche, that devastating avalanche, the worst loss of life on Everest in the history of climbing on the mountain, and 9,000 people in the country of Nepal died. And a few days afterwards, you were thinking to yourselves, maybe we should go up the mountain anyway in their memory. What happened in the end, and what did you want to do?
There was a lot of debate in the camp. There were 10 of us, plus another expedition, big expedition that was linked to ours. And we also had the Indian Army were there. They go every year. And the South Africans were still there, but a lot of the other expeditions had gone. And we were all chatting a lot about what we should do. And amongst our group, we'd spent 5 weeks there, and we'd taken, it's a 2-month expedition. It's not a short expedition. We'd taken the time out, and the general consensus we should carry on. We should carry on. Otherwise, the whole year was lost. It was the loss of lives. It was just a waste, and we should carry on and try and do it. And that was the general consensus within the group. But in the end, we didn't.
The mountain leader, the expedition leader, said no.
Yes, that's correct, and he ultimately has the right to veto the expedition.
With, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but when you look back at it, do you think that was the right decision?
It's very difficult. I can't say now whether I think that was the right or wrong decision. If we'd carried on and we'd made the summit, if we'd overridden him and we'd carried on and made the summit, then I would have said it was the wrong decision. But you don't know, because we didn't carry on. And you just had to put that behind you. The disappointment within the group was absolutely, having survived the earthquake and the avalanche, and then having that taken away. And some of the people in our group, this was their third attempt. And one American lady in the group, she'd been preparing for this for 14 years, and this was her third attempt at trying to get up the big hill.
But you did it. You did do it. And what amazes me is that you went home having survived an earthquake, cancer, anaphylactic shock on the operating table, and said to your partner, you know what, I'm going back for another go. How on earth do you have that conversation?
Well, what happened is afterwards, they closed the mountain, basically, the Nepalese, and you have to get a permit to climb it. And the Nepalese then said, well, you can use the permit for the next 2 years. Anybody that was there when the disaster hit, you can use your permit again, but you can only use it in 2016, right. 2017. So to me, I had 2 goes at it. And after the cancer, now if I have an opportunity to do something, I think about it and I think, actually, you know what, I'm going to go and do it. Because too many times in your life, you make excuses for not doing something. You think, yeah, I could, but the kids, or yeah, I could, but I've got the work. Yeah, I could, but. And now I think, no, I'm going to go and do it, because who knows what's going to be around the corner next year. And I thought I can go in 16 or 17, and I thought if I wait to 17, if the cancer comes back, I'm not going to be able to go. So let's take the first opportunity that arises. So I decided to go in 2016. And my dad, who's sitting right next to me, said, "You're nuts." He said, "You're bonkers. I don't know why have you got to go and do it." And he's just wiggling his finger around his brain at the moment to show that I'm completely insane. And so I think people struggle with it. Although my partner, she understood the need to do it, and I would have kept going back until I'd either summited or killed myself doing it. It's very, very addictive. It's very dangerous and very addictive.
How hard is it, Jules, to balance your perhaps invincibility complex that you've had after surviving all of these things with the sensitivities of those who love you and don't want you to keep doing this stuff?
It's very difficult. My daughters are my overriding factor all the time, and it's, if they don't want me to do something, they are the ones that if anybody can persuade me, they're the ones that can persuade me. Everybody else, my dad, my brother, and Vicky, they're all adults. That's fine. They can make their own decisions, and I can make mine. But my daughters are the only ones that will dissuade me from doing something.
So they're the ones, like a lot of daddies and daughters have their daddies wrapped around their little finger.
So
you can climb mountains, but you can't look in their eyes.
100%. Yeah.
And this is a man who's talking from experience as well.
Yeah, I have a 7-year-old, so I know a daughter, so I know exactly.
Wonderful.
I know exactly.
Jules, you know what? There are plenty of people though now that say that Everest has in fact been degraded by its sheer popularity. It is a tourist destination. I don't know if you heard, somebody's texted us to remind us, thank you for that. Paul Oakenfold just played a DJ set from Base Camp this morning. I mean, you know, has some of the magic gone out of this?
I think the magic is for individual people. The magic is whatever you make of it. People think I'm mad for going there in the first place and mad for going back. But for me, it was a passion, and it was something I wanted to do to prove to myself that I could do it. So I think it's all a very much individual thing. There are many people in the world that would think it's absolutely nuts. Why do you want to climb that mountain? It's a waste of time. I think it's a personal thing. I mean, when I was there this year, when I went back, they had a live comedy sketch at base camp. And I've got to say, it was absolutely brilliant. And these 4 guys had walked up there, and one of them had never done any climbing before in his life, spent 10 days getting up there. They could barely breathe at base camp, and they've got to crack jokes and do it. And it was hilarious, absolutely hilarious. And I think the BBC, actually, I think the BBC filmed it, actually. It'll be somewhere around the podcast. They were absolutely... And, you know, laughing at base camp, you were trying to laugh at jokes, I can tell you, it really is very tough. Really out of breath, really out of breath.
Literally made your sides hurt.
Yeah, I did. And it was... But, you know, it really made it fun, because base camp is a miserable place to be. You know, I crawled into my tent. I used to call it my coffin tent. I'm slightly claustrophobic. I crawl into that tent. It's minus 15. It's the same temperature as your freezer. It's like, and don't do this, kids at home, but it's like getting into your freezer at night and sleeping in your freezer for a night. It's really horrible. And I did wonder the first week I was there, I wondered whether I'd made the right decision. And I wondered every night when I went to sleep whether I'd wake up in the morning or whether I'd be frozen stiff. It really is a horrible environment. But that's a personal thing again. You know, I love the climbing. I just hate the hanging around at minus 15 and sleeping there every night.
I think we must be clear that it is still a very dangerous pursuit, isn't it? The more people may be doing it, but it's not like a jog to your supermarket, is it, by any stretch of the imagination?
No. Well, what really brought it home to me was this year when I did Summit. They said it was a very successful year this year, and 8 people died trying to summit.
Oh, there you go.
Because the comparisons between that and the last 2 years, I suppose.
Yeah, and I thought, how can you call that a successful year? 8 people have died. You know, and before that, the film, of course, the Everest film came out, which was the 1996 expedition, where 11 people died, and that was the worst disaster on Everest ever until 2014, where 16 Sherpas died in an avalanche, and they stopped the whole climb again, and then 2015, where 22 people died. When I was there.
Talking of Sherpas, do you think they're rewarded enough for what they do for large amounts of Western tourists?
I have so much respect and love for the Sherpas. They are the most lovely people I've ever come across. I've travelled all over the world, and they really are. My Sherpa, Lakpa Sherpa, was just the most generous, lovely person. And he's climbing the mountain with me. You know, he's doing it
and getting paid peanuts compared to what we get paid for our jobs. Although it's a good wage in Nepal, but
yeah. I mean, what attracts them is in the 2 months they do it, they will earn the equivalent of two years Nepalese salary in the 2 months, so they don't need to work for the rest of the year. But there's also a great pride.
It's a very poor country, though, isn't it?
It is. Oh, yeah. I mean, they're not paid. They are not paid a fair amount of money for it. And what caused the issue in 2014 is that the Sherpa families are not very well compensated if the Sherpa dies. The kids, etc., are not looked, and the partners are not looked after very well.
Well, Jules, we have almost run out of time. Just very quickly, what's next on your bucket list?
I dread to think.
Yeah, are you going to go up Ayers Rock on a pogo stick or something?
No, I've got something which I think is quite mild. It's I want to ski to the North Pole. So that's...
Well, if you thought it was cold on base camp...
I know, it's a lot colder there, actually, yeah. It's a lot colder.
Well, I hope your daughters are listening, and they'll go, Dad,
You're a brave lad.
They will. But can I mention one thing, actually,
as well? Yes, you did it for charity.
Yeah.
I did it for charity. Yeah. I did it for the UCLH Cancer Charity. They're a fabulous cancer charity that helped me when I had my lymphoma and still help me now. They're an inspiration to me. And 50% of the profit from the sale of the book goes to the charity. So I just wanted to mention that, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning that.
No, not at all.
Jules, thank you very much. It's great to talk to you. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and say thanks to your dad as well.
I will do. Nihal, Sarah, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate
Absolute
that. Thank
pleasure.
you very much.
The book's called Aftershock, and as Jules mentioned there, half of the proceeds go to the Haematology Cancer Care Charity.